Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman. This is the Google Pixel 9a. Let's get into the review. But before we do, I do want to give a shout out of thanks to my channel supporters. Details on how you can do that are in the description below. This is literally what I do all day, every day at the moment. So your support really is appreciated and needed if I'm going to continue doing this. So if this video is useful to you, if any of my videos are useful to you, please consider becoming a supporter. Now let's get on with the review. First of all, talking about the Pixel 9a's design. The Pixel 9a is built around a 6.3-inch, 29 aspect ratio, 1080 by 2424 pixel OLED display that, as per Google, peaks at up to around 2700 nits, making it one of the very brightest phones out there, and certainly the most bright in its particular price category. And that does make a significant impact to its visibility in direct sunlight. It's almost like Google's building phones specifically with Australian summers in mind. That 6.3-inch size is also a pleasing upgrade from the 6.1-inch display found on the Pixel 8a, though this doesn't make as much of a size and weight difference as you might think. The 9a has a bigger screen, but it's only 2.5mm taller and 0.1mm wider than the Pixel 8a is, and it's actually a little bit lighter too. Google sells the 9a in its classic obsidian and porcelain finishes, as well as peony and iris blue, with no colour options skipped for Australia, which is always pleasing. The model Google sent my way was the obsidian variant. In terms of durability, the 9a is rated at IP68 for water and dust resistance. As a reminder, those resistances don't mean that it's waterproof. I've got a whole video on this if you want to go check it out. But it should be able to handle accidental immersion and a bit of rain every now and again without too much stress. All so far so fine, but Google has made one major design shift for the Pixel 9a that I'll address in the next section. The iconic part of recent Pixel phone designs has been the camera bar or pill that dominates the rear of phones such as the Pixel 9 Pro or Pixel 9 Pro Fold. I can always tell when I'm looking at a Pixel phone in a TV show or movie because they look like Pixel phones. I mean, if you've watched the most recent Daredevil series, everyone in that series has a Pixel, and it's really obvious because, again, they look like Pixels. But I digress. The Pixel 9a drops that iconic design element for its cameras, opting instead for a more standard and generic dual lens array and a little bubble at the rear. It's not awful, it's not terrible design, but it sure is bland. At a hardware level, what you're shooting with is a 48 megapixel f1.7 primary wide sensor, alongside a 13 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide, while selfies are handled from a front-facing 13 megapixel f2.2 sensor. That's a technical step down in one respect from the 64 meg wide sensor that was found in the Pixel 8a, but I'd happily balance that against the Pixel 9a's f1.7 aperture, because that gives it the potential for considerably better low-light shooting, for example. So how does it compare? Well, when I first got the Pixel 9a a couple of weeks ago, I took it out for a little low-light shootout against the iPhone 16e and Samsung Galaxy S24 FE. Now, I did post this video separately, but I'm going to drop it in here, so if you've already watched that, that's cool. Jump forward a couple of minutes. If not, enjoy. Hey there, Alex Kidman here, and as part of my review of this phone, the Pixel 9a, I need to do some photography testing, but I've also got the opportunity to do a bit of comparative photography testing because the Pixel 9a, whilst it's Google's cheapest Pixel phone, is still in that kind of low premium space. It's the cheapest phone that Google makes, but I thought it'd be useful to compare it against a couple of phones that sit in broadly the same price bracket. So what we've got here is the Apple iPhone 16e and the Samsung Galaxy S24 FE. Now, I haven't arranged them in this order because the two Android phones are ganging up on the iPhone. This is actually the price order. You'll pay less for the Pixel 9a than the 16e at its lowest storage variant than the S24 FE, but it gets a bit more complicated with some of them depending on how you bump up the storage. But I'm going to take them out and do a bunch of photography tests with them, but I should set some ground rules really quickly. These are all handheld shots just taken with the default camera app for each phone. I'm letting the phones pick all of those parameters because obviously you could go quite nuts with that. And I'm doing no post-processing on these shots whatsoever. Obviously, there is a little bit of subjectivity in this, and obviously if things move in my frame outside my control, then that will change the nature of shots, but I will try and avoid that where possible. Let's get on with the comparison. First shot. The internet still likes cats, right? Because I certainly do. a basic shot and one that's pretty close, but the S24 FE takes third place here, basically because it washes out the color a little bit more. The Pixel 9a gives a more naturalistic color. The iPhone takes it because I suspect most people will want that slightly oversaturated color look, but it's very close between the 9a and the iPhone in this particular photo test. A bowl of fruit is an artistic trope, so why not photograph it? This wasn't in the best lit area, and the S24 FE struggled. Not a bad shot, and this is super close. The iPhone does a kind of plasticky thing here that I don't like. I do prefer the more naturalistic look of the 9A for this shot, so it wins that one. Let's get out into the real world, shall we? And the iPhone loses straight away and by a huge margin because while this is a perfectly fine photo, the 16E just doesn't have an ultra-wide camera. This is what happens when you put one lens on a phone, Apple. It's pretty close between the S24 FE and the Pixel for this shot, but the S24 FE just slightly overexposes the shot where the Pixel 9a gives it a more natural tone, winning that particular one, but by a very, very small margin. Time to get up close and personal. So I'm going to set the scene for this one first. This is just a local park. I'm zooming in on the shot that I took with just one of the phones here. But the idea is I wanted to see what they could do with telephoto, and there was an obvious candidate that was likely to win. Let's get into it. The Pixel 9a comes third here. It only has an 8x zoom, which just limits the scope of how close you can get. But even though the iPhone will go up to 10 times, it's not as well balanced a shot. It's really got that kind of unrealistic color to it. And that, of course, leaves the S24 FE to absolutely romp at home with its 30x zoom. Now, of course, those extreme zooms rarely turn out all that well, and I'm not pretending this does. But even if I step it back to 10x, which is what the iPhone can do, the actual shot is better, it's sharper, it's clearer. If you want telephoto, the Galaxy S24 FE is absolutely the way to go. Sadly, I have a deeply unattractive selfie subject to shoot. And this is the closest field of all of them. Honestly, they all do really quite good selfies. The reason I've arranged them this way, iPhone, then S24 FE, and then Pixel, is largely because the Pixel actually gets the color balance better. My t-shirt really was black, not that kind of gray that the 16E made it out to be, or the mid-tone that the S24 FE picked up, but they're all basically really great. Low light is, of course, important, but this one needs a little scene setting because I literally had one evening to get these shots in. I have places that I usually use for low light testing, and on the night in question, all of them were in use with floodlights or other light sources that made them unusable, so I had to improvise a bit. These are not my usual places for taking shots, but I have taken a number of them. Let's get into it. None of the phones got this pathway really wrong, but the Pixel delivered the darkest shot of the set. The iPhone delivers a more balanced take, does pick up a little bit more light, but this one I'll give to the S24 FE, which does an even better balanced overall take on that particular shot. Onto a playground in the dark where I couldn't see the colour of a piece of equipment, but the cameras could, plus bonus nighttime drinkers. Every single phone here got something different wrong, and which was interesting to me at least. The Pixel 9a is just kind of a blandish looking shot where the S24 FE is much more colourful, but the leaves in that tree are kind of blown out as a result. Meanwhile, the iPhone does maybe better with the colours, but then loses detail in the leaves. It's kind of a lose for different reasons situation, really. Also, special bonus shout out to the teenagers drinking by the table there in the background, trying to work out if I could see them. I could see you guys, but hey, it's not my job to police it. Being in Sydney sucks for astrophotography, but I tried something a little bit different here. And here the S24 FE loses out mostly because the way it's interpreted, that street light blows out most of the stars. The 9A does a nice balanced scene, but the iPhone, I think, does a prettier scene, kind of close between them. And to finish up, a shot where I literally just turned the cameras towards some trees. I couldn't see a thing, it was that dark. What would the phones see though? The Pixel 9a picked up the least light here. I will admit to an error here. This one is shot in a different aspect ratio to the other two. That error is mine, but it shouldn't change the amount of light it's going to pick up. The iPhone does a better job of picking up colour and detail, and I will say its low light setup where it tries to show you what it thinks the scene looks like does make some framing a little bit easier. And I bring that up because on the night I would have sworn the S24 FE was going to come dead last. Its shots looked in the phone as though it was just picking up mostly blackness, but its post-processing did a really solid job of bringing out a lot of detail where my eyes could make out none. So while the Pixel 9a might not win the low light wars entirely, it does present most of its photos in a pleasingly naturalistic way, where a lot of its competitors tend towards shots with rather garish post-processing done by the phone itself. Now, naturally, you're free to post-process for specific looks. If you're that type of photographer, that's totally cool. But for folks looking for simple, real-world shots that look good, the Pixel 9a does well almost no matter what type of shot I threw at it. You're still going to need to spend more for pro-level smartphone photography, as you'd expect, but for the everyday crowd, you've got to work fairly hard to get a shot out of the Pixel 9a that doesn't look good in most situations. The core appeal for Google's Pixel A series phones is that they pack in the same processor cores as the previous year's flagship phones. So while we'll all but certainly see a Tensor G5 in the Pixel 10 line when it appears later this year, what it means here is that you're getting the Tensor G4 in the 9A, along with 8GB of RAM and either 128GB or 256GB of fixed storage. As with all Pixel phones, microSD expansion just isn't a thing. A more cynical journalist than me might even think that Google was trying to sell more cloud storage, but that couldn't be the reason, could it? In the actual premium space, where you're paying, more than $1,000 easily for a phone, the Tensor G4 has always trailed the best that the likes of Qualcomm or Apple offer in straight-line performance benchmark terms. But once you set that bar below $1,000, you do start to see the performance of competing phones trail off, or at least for some phone models. Apple's introduction of the iPhone 16e has, of course, slightly muddied those waters. So how does the Pixel 9a actually stack up? Well, let's start out looking at CPU performance against comparably priced phones using Geekbench 6's CPU test. And look, here, honestly, I'm rather used to the Pixels sitting rather dead last in their field because they're competing against premium flagships. So the Pixel 9a sitting in the middle here is kind of refreshing, especially when you consider that pretty much all the phones that are actually beating it in that table are $100 or more expensive than it is at their base configuration. Some of them considerably more if you go up in the storage tiers. It's not the best in class for sure, but there's a decent quantity of processing power here, while also offering a nice boost over the Pixel 8a. Although, as always, it's never actually worth it upgrading year on year, but, of course, Google's been pushing Pixels out, and Pixel A phones specifically, out for some years now. So how does the Pixel 9a stack up historically if you're a long-term Pixel A user looking to upgrade? Well, based off Geekbench CPU, here's how it compares. I should point out here, the Pixel 7 is in there because at the time of benchmarking the 7a, Google was blocking a lot of popular benchmarks. It was a thing they used to do. Thankfully, they don't do it so much anymore. And the 5a is missing simply because it never got released in Australia. But still, the 9a shows a really nice progression there, where if you were coming from something like, say, the 6a or the 7a, yeah, this would be a really nice bounce up in straight-line performance terms. It's not quite as good a picture for the Pixel 9a jumping back to concurrent phones in a GPU sense, however. Here's how the Pixel 9a compares using 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme test, for example. Now, that GPU performance will matter more to you if you're looking to the Pixel 9a as, for example, a high-end gaming phone, which it really isn't. However, having used the Pixel 9a over the past couple of weeks, I could have rushed out a review early, but that just isn't my style. I'd rather do these reviews properly. I can safely say that for most users, it's going to be more than powerful enough. I've long noted that flagship phones are often, honestly, overpowered for all but the most demanding users, and that's absolutely the case here. Higher-end Android games will run on the Pixel 9a, though you may need to dial down a few settings from their maximums for some of them. Like other Pixel phones, you get the benefit with the Pixel 9a of seeing Android updates and security updates first, and for a pleasing 7-year span for both. Google also promises Pixel feature drops over that period, though it doesn't specify what those will be because, of course, they're new Pixel features. Though it is fair to guess that the Pixel 9a will see some Pixel features over the years that don't need, newer processors or similar, but maybe not all of them over that 7-year lifespan. The Pixel 9a is also AI ready with Google's suite of AI features and photo editing features, which I've run through in previous Pixel 9 reviews, though not all of the suite actually is found in the 9a. Pixel Screenshots, for example, isn't in here. Honestly, I'm still waiting for that killer AI feature on consumer-grade smartphone that gives me that light bulb moment where it becomes must-have, but there's little doubting that Google's AI is in a more advanced state than, for example, Apple's is right now. The full Pixel 9 Pro phones also offered up a year's worth of Gemini Advanced if you bought them. And while I figured, and still figure, that the best part of that is the 1TB of free cloud storage that goes with it, there's no such largesse on Google's part when it comes to the Pixel 9a. That comes with the cheaper territory, I guess, because all you can score here is the standard trial period of Gemini Advanced if you've never had a trial period before. On the actual phone as a phone side, the Pixel 9a is 5G sub 6 GHz capable. Phone performance always varies by network and localized usage conditions, but testing with the Telstra network, mostly in suburban Sydney, saw few issues. But also nothing out of the ordinary in terms of achievable speeds. Calls were fine and clear according to callers, but that's very much table stakes for any phone not found free in a cereal box these days. The Pixel 9a packs in a 5100 mAh battery, just a skosh more than the 5000 mAh you see on most typical non-folding Android phones. Now, that extra 100 mAh isn't a huge tick upwards in battery capacity, and despite Google's claims of 30+ hour battery life, I always like to test these things as methodically as possible. But of course, everyone's battery usage is different, so this isn't always entirely straightforward. I've got a whole video on battery testing methodologies and what I do if you want to dive a little bit deeper into that. But for comparative purposes, I ran the Pixel 9a through my standard YouTube battery test. Here's how it compared against other high-end mid-range phones. This is easily the Pixel 9a's best feature. The battery life is just phenomenal. It beats its predecessors by a few percentage points and every other phone in the test group every step of the way as well. And that follows through in anecdotal usage too. Unless you absolutely hammer the Pixel 9a with heavy-duty apps in a truly relentless fashion, it's going to last out the day for you before you have to reach for a charger. Now that's the good news. The bad news here is it's not the fastest charging phone in this price bracket. It does support both wired USB-C and wireless Qi charging, no charger in the box though, although only at a maximum of 23 watts for wired charging and 7.5 watts for Qi. No sign of Qi 2 here, though it would admittedly have been odd for Google to break its Qi 2 cherry on the more affordable model Pixel. So is the Pixel 9a worth buying? Yeah, I really do think it is. Look, I don't like the fact that the price on Pixel A series phones isn't what it used to be, because I really do miss the days of great value Google branded handsets, and if anyone at Google's listening, I'd be happy to consult on the ways you could bring back the Nexus line, but that's not the point here. The Pixel 9a is an overall excellent device and a very easy phone to recommend within its price bracket. Its battery life is superb, its cameras are pleasant to use, and the promise of 7 years updates should keep it ticking along nicely for about as long as you're likely to want to keep a phone going.